Radha Madhava Gopi Jana Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajanara Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivirajak Jai Ashuttara Sata Shri Śrimad His Divine Shri Guru Gauranga Vaishnava Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Today we are reading from Śrimad Bhāgavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 7, verse 24 to 26. So the main verse is 24, then once we've done that, I'll just reread 25 and 26. Okay. Api arvagvritayo yasya is Api arvagvritayo yasya mahitav atmabhuv adaya mahitav atmabhuv adaya yatha mati grinanti sma yatha mati grinanti sma kritanugraha vigraham kritanugraha vigraham api arvagvritayo yasya api arvagvritayo yasya mahitav atmabhuv adaya mahitav atmabhuv adaya yatha mati grinanti sma yatha mati grinanti sma kritanugraha vigraham kritanugraha vigraham. Prabhus. Api arva karitaya yasya ma Graha Api arvagvritayo yasya mahitavatma bhuvadaya yatha mati grinanti sma kritanugraha vigraham yatha vargvritayo yasya mahitavatma bhuvadaya yatha mati grinanti sma kritanugraha vigraham api arvagvritayo yasya yatha mati grinanti sma kritanugraha vigraham api arvagvritayo yasya mahitavatma bhuvadaya yatha mati grinanti sma kritanugraha. Okay. Api, still, arvagvritaya, beyond the mental activities. Yasya, whose. Mahi, glory. Tu, but. Atma bhu adaya, Brahma. Yathamati, according to their different capacities. Grinantisma, offered prayers. Krita anugraha, manifested by His grace. Vigraham, transcendental form. Translation. Although the mental scope of even demigods like Brahma was unable to comprehend the unlimited glories of the Supreme Lord, they were all able to perceive the transcendental form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by His grace. Only by such grace could they offer their respectful prayers according to their different capacities. Purport. The Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, is always unlimited, and His glories cannot be completely enumerated by anyone, even by a personality like Lord Brahma. It is said that Ananta, a direct incarnation of the Lord, has unlimited mouths, and with each mouth he has been trying to describe the glories of the Lord for an unlimited span of time. Yet, the glories of the Lord remain unlimited, and He therefore never finishes. It is not possible for any ordinary living entity to understand or to glorify the unlimited personality of Godhead, but one can offer prayers or service to the Lord according to one's particular capacity. This capacity is increased by the service spirit. Sevan mukhehi jivado means that by the service of the Lord begins with the tongue. This refers to chanting. By chanting Hare Krishna, one begins the service of the Lord. Another function of the tongue is to taste and accept the Lord's prasad. We have to begin our service to the unlimited with the tongue and become perfect in chanting and accepting the Lord's prasad. To accept the Lord's prasad means to control the entire set of senses. The tongue is considered to be the most uncontrollable sense because it hankers for so many unwholesome eatables. Therefore, forcing the living entity into the dungeon of material conditional life. As the living entity transmigrates from one form of life to another, he has to eat so many abominable foodstuff that finally there is no limit. The tongue should be engaged in chanting and in eating the Lord's prasad so that the other senses will be controlled. Chanting is the medicine and prasad is the diet. With these processes, one can begin his service, and as the service increases, the Lord reveals more and more to the devotee, but there is no limit to His glories, and there is no limit to engaging oneself in the service of the Lord. I'll read the next two verses. I'll just go straight into English. When Lord Vishnu accepted the oblations offered in the sacrifice, Daksha, the Prajapati, began with great pleasure to offer respectful prayers unto him. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually the master of all sacrifices and preceptor of all the Prajapatis, and he is served even by such personalities as Nanda and Sunanda. Make sure I've missed a verse. Okay. Next one. Daksha addressed the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear Lord, you are transcendental to all speculative positions. You are completely spiritual, devoid of all fear, and you are always in control of the material energy. Even though you appear in the material energy, you are situated transcendentally. You are always free from material contamination because you are completely self-sufficient. Om Gyantimarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna. So we just read this amazing verse, and just to give some context, so we know that Daksha has been punished by Lord Shiva and now he's reformed. So Lord Vishnu has appeared, and all the demigods, he's given the opportunity to all the demigods to glorify him. And this shows that the Lord. Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. It shows that the Lord is neutral in his position, but he gives an opportunity for all the assembled personalities to glorify him. And Prabhupada talks about, in the purport, he says that to glorify the Lord depends on the mercy. Oh, thank you. Hare Krishna. The mercy given by the Lord. You can't randomly just glorify the Lord. It comes with some sort of empowerment, some sort of permission from the Lord. So I was just thinking about this actually because, if you look at great personalities, especially in our parampara, all the acharyas were great scholars, great panditas, and they were very eloquent. They wrote many books. High level Sanskrit. One can infer that, well, you have to be a great pandit. The best way to glorify the Lord is by knowing Sanskrit, by knowing the Vedas inside out, by being super sophisticated. But that's not actually the case. We read of different acharyas, like Gaurkishore Das Babji Maharaj. He was literate, but he couldn't read or write, but he was fully conversant with the message of Krishna consciousness. And he was like, you could say he was like an Avadhuta in one sense. He was the way he lived, the way he acted, it was very bewildering. But when he spoke Krishna Tattva, it was very eloquent, very powerful. Now, it's also like we sometimes we hear people like give great classes, and they're very good at logic, they're very good at memorizing verses. Then we have the other person, someone else who's not so learned, and he's not so great at debating either. But does that mean that person is lacking in his ability to communicate Krishna consciousness? Not really, because Krishna says, Prabhupada says in the purport, it's all about capacity, right? What you do according to your capacity. So it's not that we understand that quantity and quality is there, but what's more important is the quality. You're doing your best according to your capacity. So I was just thinking when Prabhupada first came, and he established back to God, he would encourage his followers. He'd say, whatever you know, write an article. Share whatever you know. Even if you know something, one simple sentence, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, preach that, write about it. And that message will have potency. So you don't need to know all these great shastras, you don't need to know all these different formulas of the Vedas. And I thought that was really interesting because the potency is in the sincerity and the surrender. Because bhakti begins with surrender. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayish ami masuchaha. So even a bhakta with simple faith, he or she can glorify the Lord and the Lord will be pleased by it. But even that capacity comes from the Lord. He empowers them. So I was remembering one story of one Prabhupada disciple. So you can't hear? Huh? Okay. So I was thinking about, there was one devotee in Scotland, you may not know her. She was a Prabhupada disciple, and she wasn't like a famous devotee in our movement. She wasn't a big book distributor. She wasn't a great scholar. In fact, most people didn't even hear of her. She was a simple devotee. She lived in Scotland all her life. And, she got cancer. So she found it in late stages. So it was terminal. She was going to pass away. And so her husband and the devotees there started to look after her. And, she was just a very simple devotee, very simple faith. She just did her service, her chanting. But towards the end of her life, she started to, talk about her swarup in the spiritual. She realized her swarup, and she was talking about who she was. I mean, you can read the book. It's called Simple for the Simple. And and she was explaining who she was in the spiritual, what she was doing. And then I remember the person who wrote the preface to the book. He was saying this person had just had simple faith. She wasn't famous. You probably wouldn't even know this person, but because she had simple faith, that pleased Krishna. And sometimes, I thought that was really amazing. So it's not that we have to be these great scholars and great pundits. So glorification is kirtan means glorification. It's based on one's sincerity and surrender, and it is also based on empowerment from the Lord. So it's not that we have to be super qualified. We have to do according to the best of our capacity. And, when Prabhupada first came to the West, if you read Lilamrita, you hear about devotees they were playing for Prabhupada, and they were using all these instruments. It was kind of like makeshift. They had this, I don't know what it was called. It was meant to be a whopper. But it wasn't a whopper, it was some abomination. I don't know what it was. But anyway, they were using that, and Prabhupada accepted. He accepted the sincerity. And they didn't have a proper mridanga, so they got this, I think it was an African drum or something, I don't know what it's called, but anyway, Prabhupada was playing that. And Prabhupada accepted it, and there's actually one devotee, he gave Prabhupada, because for Vyasa Puja you give gift to the spiritual master, and he gave Prabhupada this rug. It was a baby rug actually, and Prabhupada, when he saw it, he threw it away. So what is this? Then when that devotee came back to Prabhupada's house, Prabhupada laid it out on his floor. He accepted it. It's not like a sophisticated gift you give to the spiritual master. But Prabhupada accepted it because he accepted the sincerity. So to glorify the Lord, you can't really do justice to it. And if we study, the avatars of the Lord, like Anantashesh, he is God, and it's explained he's got unlimited mouths, and he's always speaking about the Lord. He's always glorifying Krishna, but he can't come to an end of it. Now imagine God himself can't glorify himself unlimitedly, right? In fact, we just had Gaur Pranim. Krishna, why did Krishna appear? Why did Krishna appear? One of the main reasons he appeared was to understand the love that his devotees have for him, especially Radharani's love, because he couldn't understand it. And he's Swayam Bhagavan Krishna. He's Purna. He's got all the qualities. He had to come as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with the mood of Srimati Radharani to understand the mood, to understand the love, because even he couldn't understand it. There's a pastime in Krishna book when Krishna saw his reflection on the floor, in his palace, and he was mesmerized by this beautiful form. So imagine even Krishna is kind of like not fully conversant of his greatness, because just like it says in the six Shastakam prayers, Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam, that Krishna's bliss is always increasing. Krishna's potencies are always increasing. I remember this pastime where someone said to Prabhupada, can God create something that he can't lift, right? So can he create something that he can't lift? So Prabhupada says, sure, he can, but later on he'll be able to lift it, because his potencies are always increasing. So you can't glorify the Lord. You cannot glorify the Lord fully. So if God himself can't do it, how can we? Now we can get even understand. I was reading about devotees when they were making the Mayapur temple. They were talking, a few years before, they were talking about they wanted to design the universe structure, because Prabhupada wanted the devotees to explain it. And devotees were going backwards and forwards. And there's a book by Sadhaputta Prabhu. He's a scientist, and he wrote this book about the universe structure. And it's quite a technical book, but he explains that because in the Bhāgavatam, the way the universe is described is different from other scriptures. And he was explaining that it's from the perspective of personalities on different planets, how they're perceiving the universe from their senses, right? And he was saying, so devotees were getting very confused. So one Prabhupada disciple, he came in contact with this book from this Pandit in Vrindavan, and he was saying, and this Pandit said, you cannot understand the universe, this Brahmananda, this universe, with our Kali Yuga brains, with our senses. It's just not possible, because we're not intelligent enough. Our brain capacity is very, very limited. Now, so imagine we can't even understand this universe properly. We can't even understand it fully for scripture, because our brains won't be able to comprehend it. Like I remember when Prabhupada, he was describing the universe. He was talking about it to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and other devotees. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, this doesn't make sense according to logic. How can it? I can't remember the description, but it was, it was talking about the structure of the universe. And when Tamal Krishna Maharaj was understanding it through logic, for his logic, and he said, this doesn't make sense. So Prabhupada said, you are simply prejudiced. You've been prejudiced to believe your way is the only way of understanding. Your logic or material logic is the only way, but there's a high logic which you don't perceive. So it's just like the ant. The ant is trying to understand, his domain, right? He has a very limited understanding. But he doesn't know about what's going on in other countries. He doesn't know about space. So we're like that ant. We're trying to understand this universe. What to speak of Krishna? So we can't understand Krishna fully. So Krishna's glories are unlimited, you can't understand it fully. Now, like if you read the Acharya's books, there's this famous set of books by Jiva Goswami called the Sandarbhas. There's one specific book, two of them which I've read, Tattva Sandarbha and Krishna. In Tattva Sandarbha, he explains why Bhāgavatam is the highest authority, and he goes through all these different evidences, right? Like he's based on the notes of Gopala Bhatta Goswami. He goes through all these notes, and then in Krishna Sandarbha he proves why Krishna is Supreme Personality Godhead, using the Bhāgavatam. And he uses all these arguments, and it's like, when one reads it, you're like, oh my God, where did these arguments come from? It's inconceivable. So it's so we cannot fully grasp everything. We cannot fully understand everything through our intelligence. Like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and there's a story which nicely explains this point. He was invited to this debate, and in this debate, they said to him, you have to prove Krishna consciousness, but you can't use Bhagavad Gita or Śrimad Bhāgavatam, because that's what we primarily use, right? So Bhaktisiddhanta said, sure, no problem. Then the organizer said, you can't use the Puranas. So the Bhaktisiddhanta said, sure, no problem. He said, you can't use the Upanishads. He said, sure, no problem. Then they said, don't come. Because because they were trying to take away his primary sources of evidence, but he wasn't spooked by that. He wasn't inconvenienced because he used to say very openly, I can prove Krishna through every syllable of the Vedas. So imagine through the Devanagari script, the alphabet, he can prove it through the syllables. How does one do that? So basically, Krishna is within everything. Krishna is everywhere, but to perceive that, it requires spiritual empowerment, and not everyone has that. But so we can't fully. What I'm trying to say, we cannot fully glorify Krishna. We can do this to the best of our capacity, and it's the quality which is more important. And if you look at, if you look at really Lamrita, how devotees in the beginning they celebrated Vyas Puja, they celebrated festival. It was quite imperfect from the Vedic point of view. It wasn't on the same level as what they do in Vrindavan, in the Goswami temples, in the Sri Vaishnava temples, but they had such sincerity that Prabhupada accepted it. Like I remember it's quite a funny pastime where Jayananda Prabhu, he was trying to say his Gayatri mantra, and he couldn't pronounce it properly, and then Prabhupada started to laugh. And Prabhupada said, you'll never be able to do it. But because you're so sincere, Krishna will accept it. Now imagine, because in Vedic culture, it's all about pronouncing things in a very strict way, it's very pedantic. But Prabhupada said sincerity is more important. Now obviously that doesn't mean we don't make the effort to chant it to the best of our ability, but it's the sincerity which is more important. So we can't glorify the Lord fully, but we can do it according to our capacity. And we don't we're not meant to become scholars or pundits. We're just meant to, Prabhupada said, read his books, and his books will give you everything you need to become Krishna conscious, to make others Krishna conscious, and go back to Godhead. These 4 books, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Nectar Devotion. These 4 books are all we need. So we don't need anything more than that. So Prabhupada talks about, in the purpose, he talks about, the way to come to that platform is by controlling the tongue. He says, 7 mukhehi jivado. He says, prashadam and chanting Hare Krishna. And if you read Lilamrita, it's very interesting. When Prabhupada only spoke in 26 Second Avenue Temple, he only spoke for 20 minutes. He didn't give very high-level philosophy. It was very simple. You're not the body. Krishna is Supreme Personality Godhead. Material nature is not your real home. Very simple philosophy. Then he chanted Hare Krishna, got everyone to dance. And then he distributed prashadam. Sometimes Prabhupada distributed apples. And, and a lot of devotees in the early days used to come for the prashadam because, they were hippies, they didn't have resources. And it was a very simple program. It wasn't very technical, it wasn't very, but that simple program of giving prashadam, chanting Hare Krishna, it did the job. It made those people Krishna conscious. So I remember when I heard the story, so they were talking about these these devotees that had left ISKCON. They'd gone to I think Gaudiya Math or something. And after a while they came back. And they said, why did you come back? And they said, well, the prashadam outside ISKCON was so bad, so we had to come back. So it's a fact. You go, I went to non-ISKCON temples, Hindu temples in the UK, and tell you the prashadam was not good. But when you go in ISKCON, the prashadam is amazing. It's like the prashadam in ISKCON is so good. It's opulent, but at the same time, the spiritual potency is behind it. I remember when I was in Hungary, when I went to Hungary for the first time, to New Vajradam, and they were giving porridge, and I don't know what they did. I think they put salt in it or something. I don't know what it was, right? I remember it was a bit weird. It was not what I was used to in England, but it tasted amazing. It was so simple. I remember because because it's a self-sufficient, self-reliant farm community. When we first arrived, I was used to getting sandwiches, or used to getting like some sort of, something prepared. They gave us like this loaf of bread. It's a very European thing, village thing, to give you a loaf of bread, very like traditional. And I saw it, I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm used to it being sliced, put in, butter, cheese, lettuce, but they gave us a loaf of bread and we ate it. And I remember tasting it, I was like, this is amazing, And it was just like, because they got their grains from their land, but it was so simple. So, but just by eating Krishna Prasadam, our tongue comes under control. I know there's like this fad now. I've noticed with devotees. Like it wasn't like when I first came. Like now, I don't know about America, but in England it's very popular that because you're vegetarian, like with devotees, a lot of devotees like to go to all these vegan places now. Like they like to get fake meat. I don't know what it's called, soya or Satan or something like that. Yeah, something like that. And they'll go to these restaurants and they'll post. What's that? Yeah. And in England it's massive, and it's like the most popular restaurant where devotees go to is a Swaminarayan restaurant called Shayona. And it's like when we really, I would say from an external point of view, it's better than our Govindas in terms of prasadam taste. But so all the devotees are going there, and when they used to go there, they used to say this mantra, Shri Vishnu 3 times. Now I don't know, you guys may be too young to remember it, but when I first came, they would do that, and they would say, yeah, you just say this, it's prasadam, and everyone started saying, even I said it, and then the Prabhupada disciple Vyasiki Prabhu, he wrote it wasn't an article, but he wrote about it. He said, Shri Vishnu is what you chant to purify water. It's never been used for prasadam. And actually, Prabhupada heard a devotee do that. And Prabhupada said, where did you get this from? Where did you hear this is Shri Vishnu from? It was, the devotee was Ganesh Prabhu. I think it was in Australia. And Prabhupada said, just chant Hare Krishna. Or chant the prasadam prayers. That's enough. You don't need to do all this Shri Vishnu. This is not our tradition. So I remember devotees would do it so fashionably. So anyway, the point is that, when you're eating food items from outside, it's going to have effect on your consciousness. But when you're eating, even if it's simple prasadam, even if it's like a loaf of bread made by a devotee, right? Because it's offered to Krishna, it's made by the devotee with consciousness, the transcendental effect will be there. Like I was thinking about, someone was asking a question to a devotee and said, how do I preach to this guy? He's like a hardcore atheist. He's very difficult. He's hard to defeat in debate. And the senior devotee said, just give him some prasadam to eat. And I thought, why would you give him prasadam? What's that going to do? That's not going to answer these philosophical questions. But then eventually I understood, that will make him receptive. He will start to accumulate agyata sukriti, spiritual credits. There's a famous pastime. Some people say it didn't happen. I've heard it happened in Calcutta, where Bhaktisiddhanta, this person came to visit him. He was a vice chancellor of Calcutta University. He was this very erudite, scholarly person, and he wanted to come to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and ask him philosophical questions about the Vedas. So Bhaktisiddhanta said, I'm a bit busy. You can go and see this brahmachari in the deity kitchen. He'll answer your questions. So this man, this vice chancellor, was like, well, I've got very technical questions for you. Only you can answer them. So Bhaktisiddhanta said, no, ask him. He'll be able to do it. I'm a bit busy. So he went to see him, and the pujari said, sure, I'll answer your questions, but can you help me wash the pots? Now imagine this guy is like, in those days, like a vice chancellor of university was like a member of government, a member of of such a senior position. But because he had some culture, he said, fine, I'll do it. Reluctantly he did it. Then after a few hours, he didn't even speak to the brahmachari. He went straight back to Bhaktisiddhanta. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, so what happened? Were your question answered? He said, yes, they were answered. Just by those washing those pots, all my answers came to me. So Bhaktisiddhanta said, yes, this is the way you understand Krishna consciousness. He said, seven mukhe hi jivado, by a service mentality. Now obviously, he didn't eat prasadam, but it was the fact that he did service, he accepted Bhaktisiddhanta's instruction, he did it. He was able to understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So you can't understand it externally. So when you have prasadam, it's like you're accumulating spiritual credits, right? It's not like material credits. And the more you accumulate, then you surrender to Krishna. So just giving someone prasadam, like, there's different names for all these different sweets that came about. I think there's a coconut one, the pink one, I don't know what it's called. Anyway, ISKCON bullet, I think it's called. Anyway, so, huh? Simply Wonderful. There's an ISKCON bullet as well. So in London we used to, huh? Yeah. So yeah. So in England, when we used to do university preaching, we used to give this at Freshers' Fair, and all the students, they used to have some, and eventually those people used to come to our program just for prasadam. They used to come to eat our prasad, and then from that they used to chant Hare Krishna. Then they'd read the philosophy. So just prasadam, you can make the most hardcore devotee, the hardcore person who's an atheist or Mayavadi or whatever. You can eventually make him receptive to Krishna consciousness by eating some simple prasadam. But that prasadam has to be cooked by a devotee, has to be offered to Krishna. You can't just go to, I don't know what you have here, but some vegan place and buy and offer to him. That's not going to work, Yeah. In England, it's a whole thing, like devotees, they do this program, they go there, like, I remember I went to a few, and it was about 50 of us that went. It was someone's birthday or something, but it's not prasadam. You may offer it, you may say Shri Vishnu, but it's not really prasadam. so prasadam, huh? Probably, yeah. Imagine the consciousness, like. Offered to you?
Somebody like, I don't know.
Oh.
Let's say you do a book distribution, you trade a book for somebody asks for a donation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You give them a book, they give you food. It's offered. Is it offered?
Well, I've never heard that. No, I never heard that. I remember, I heard something like, I don't know if it's similar, but Keshav Maharaj was telling me when he was a brahmachari that he was doing book distribution, and this Christian, born again Christian came up to him and gave him something to do with the Bible. So he accepted it, and he gave him the Bhagavad Gita. Then Keshav Maharaj, he distributed that Bible to another Christian and got a donation for it. So I guess in one sense that person got a benefit, I don't know. But anyway, so what's interesting is, so when you control the tongue, everything goes nicely. You control even what you speak. Becomes very devotional. And it starts with prasadam and chanting Hare Krishna. Now, what's interesting is these demigods who were glorifying the Lord. They were glorifying according to their capacity. Now, the demigods, they generally worship Lord in the mood of awe and reverence, right? They acknowledge His power and they glorify Him on that basis. But the Vrajvasis, the residents of Vrindavan, they don't talk about that. They worship Krishna based on his sweetness, his personality, his childhood, his pastimes. Him messing around with the monkeys, with stealing the gopis' clothes. They glorify Him on that basis. They glorify Him on a very personal level, on a very intimate level. Because in our philosophy, the more intimate really understanding God is based on intimacy. So that's why we have the 5 ways of intimately cultivating a relationship with the Lord. So like we even like the different personalities like Lord Brahma and all these, they don't even understand this intimate mood of the Lord. So when they worship the Lord, it's very in a mood of awe reverence. So like Brahma Samhita, if you study the prayers, it does mention something about Vrindavan, but it's not the way the Goswamis describe the Lord. It's not very rasic. It's not very intimate, So whereas when for example the Sri Vaishnavas, the Madhvacharyas, when they glorify the Lord, it's very based on His potency. It's very based on Him being God. So in our philosophy, we worship God not because He's God, but because He's a wonderful person. I remember like hearing this point, and someone was saying that Krishna's pastimes are incredible, and this devotee corrected him and said, no, Krishna's pastimes are not incredible, because incredible means hard to believe. Krishna's pastimes are wonderful. So like devotee said that He's incredible, but incredible means it's hard to believe. It's not difficult to believe that Krishna can do these things because He's God. He can do all these things. So anyway, so how do we attain Krishna's mercy? By accepting what Krishna gives us, having His prasad, chanting Hare Krishna. Even chanting unknowingly will have the benefit. I remember like in London, when I used to go to central London with my family, or when I was a child or with my friends, I remember I'd see the devotees chanting. You know, and because I was a Hindu, I'd think, okay, yeah, this is a Hindu thing. But then I'd think this is a bit extreme, you know, like wearing the saffron robes and all that, you know. And then I remember, like, I would chant it. Like, I accepted the mantra, but I accepted it as a bona fide mantra, but I didn't, because I used to chant it, like, to myself, but mostly to make fun of the devotees. You know, I'd find it, and I remember we had this catchy song, you know, and like, because where I lived, in London, there was a Gaudiya Math temple, so they'd come to our house often, like, you know, to collect donations and stuff, so we'd give donation. But I remember just reading it, you know, like, I remember chanting it, and I remember reading back to Godhead when I was young. I didn't understand it. I think it was back in 1989, I read back to Godhead. I was like 9 years old, I didn't understand it. But it had an effect, you know, so me not understanding it, me doing it unknowingly, it had the effect, you know, like I turned to Krishna consciousness, you know, trying to be a devotee. So these activities, these agyata sugritis have so much potency that we shouldn't like minimize them. They're very powerful. Just giving someone prashadam, that little prashadam can have such a powerful effect. There's this very amazing story of book distribution where basically the devotees were distributing books somewhere in Europe. And there was this guy who was antagonistic. He would approach the devotees, he would take the book, pretend, you know, I'm interested, and he would rip up the book, throw it on the floor and stamp on it. And he was doing this on a regular basis. Now, after a while, this person who was doing this offense, he became a devotee, and he's actually a leader in our movement. Now, I don't know who he is, but this Prabhupada disciple knows him very well, was talking about it. You know, you don't embarrass the guy. But imagine, he was doing it in such an offensive way, it had the effect. So this is the power of Krishna consciousness, you know, just unknowingly doing it in jest will have the effect. So, you know, like, so we may not understand the Lord fully, but if we understand according to our capacity and engage that, then we can make all a spiritual advancement, you know. We may not understand the fifth canto, we may not understand the universe, we may not understand Krishna's completely. How does Krishna do something? How is it? It doesn't really matter. It's a sincerity, it's surrender. And I'll just finish on this pastime. You know, there's the story of Narada Muni. He was going to Vaikuntha, and on the way he met a Brahmana, and I believe it wasn't a cobbler, it was, I can't remember what his occupation was, but he was someone of that status. So the Brahmana said, can you ask the Lord, when will I go back to Godhead? And then the person, let's just say it's cobbler, just for argument's sake, he said, can you ask the Lord as well? So the Narada Muni, he went to Vaikuntha, he met Lord Narayan, and he said, well, you know, these two people, the Brahman and the cobbler, they asked me, when will they go back to Godhead? So Narada Muni, so Lord Vishnu said, well, the Brahmana, he's going to take many lifetimes. I don't know when he's going to go back. But the cobbler, he's going to go back in this lifetime. So then Narada Muni was like, he's bewildered. He said, what are you talking about? How does this make sense? This Brahmana, he's glorifying you, he's worshipping you according to the Vedic rules and formulas. This cobbler guy, he's not doing anything like that. So anyway, Narada Muni came back. So before he came back, Lord Vishnu said to him, well, tell them what I'm doing. Say to them, I'm threading an elephant through the head of a needle. So he went back and he met the Brahmana, and he said to the Brahmana says, so what is the Lord doing? So the Narada Muni said he was threading an elephant through the head of a needle. So the Brahmana was like, this is ridiculous, why would you do that? You know, it doesn't make any sense. And then he met the cobbler and he said the same thing to the cobbler. And then the cobbler, instead of not believing it, he started glorifying the Lord. He said, this is amazing, my Lord can do anything. So then Narada Muni understood that the cobbler may not know much, but he had that simple faith that the Lord is capable of doing such things, and he understood that it was actually the cobbler who was the real devotee, who had the real faith. The Brahmana didn't really have faith in the Lord. So anyway, I'll stop here. If anyone would like to make a comment or ask questions. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhu. It's always nice when you come. You give so many different examples. I really like that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur example. When you're talking about prasadam, it made me remember, it was in, Madhavananda Prabhu's magazines, the Katam Rita. And there was one, I think we actually have it upstairs. I have to reread the source, but from my memory, the name of the article was Govinda can digest it, but you cannot. And it was basically a story about a bunch of pujaris that I think they got a bunch of donation from the king,
Yes.
and they made a big feast. And then they found that they all became extremely lusty at night, and they're all wondering what was going on. And they asked one pandit, and he said, "Oh, well, Govinda can digest that, but you cannot." And the thing is, it's like, you know, whatever we're offering, it can be offered to Krishna maybe, and the person can get the benefit. But it's not that then we have to take that as well. You know, it's good to have someone want to offer something to Krishna or want to offer something to us as a representative of Krishna, and we should do that. But if it's something that we can't digest, like it's, you know, something karmi grains or something made with onions and garlic or any other kind of thing that we shouldn't be taking, then we don't have to take it. You could just give it to someone else who can take it, who's not really following a regulation or something like that. And yeah, so that was one thing that I was thinking about.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's important. Just if you eat Krishna prasadam, I remember like when I got initiated for like 6 months, I stopped eating karmi grains, and I know it's a huge change in my consciousness. You know, like, and you can do it. It's so powerful. I mean, if you're living in a temple, it's easy to do temple prasadam. But if you stop but when you're outside, it's difficult. But if you do that, it's going to be the most powerful, disproportionate effect you're going to have in your spiritual life. You're going to note it's going to be easy for you to control your tongue. This is something I perceived myself. Anyone else? Haribo.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much for the wonderful class. So, Prabhu, you were saying about glorification of the Lord, and like someone like me who has no knowledge about the potency, neither the like pastimes of the Lord. So, how should I make an attempt to glorify Krishna?
Well, you should study Prabhupada's books and hear from devotees, and whatever you hear, try to understand it, and according to your realization, glorify Krishna. So, like, there's one pastime with Prabhupada where he was speaking to these two people. I don't know what they were, and Prabhupada was debating with them, and Prabhupada said, "Who's God?" And they couldn't give a direct answer. So then he called his Gurukuli Indian girl, and he said to her, "Who's God?" And she said, "Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead." And Prabhupada was very pleased, gave her a sweet, and she went back to playing. And Prabhupada said, this is someone who understands, who can glorify Krishna. So our philosophy is, whatever you know, you preach. So you preach according to your capacity. Obviously, when you're practicing devotional service, you will have more realization, and you can glorify that. But whatever you know at this point, you glorify. But try to think about it. Try to do it in your words. Because Prabhupada said, don't try to be like a parrot, but try to put your realization into it, put your love and devotion into it. But don't speak outside your realization, because then you're not going to be able. It's not genuine. It's not authentic. Is that okay?
Hare Krishna, it's always a pleasure when you come around. I have a question. I appreciate how you talked about how God is like impossible to imagine in our logic brains.
Yeah.
Actually, the other day, a person called me. He wanted me to explain how God, for example, he rides on Garuda, Vishnu.
Yes.
And he wanted me to explain because he said in his words that we're from America, the Western Hemisphere, we're logical people.
Yeah.
So how would you explain to a person that's hard to believe? I mean, has hard way comprehending that God
rides on a bed. Well, I mean, if you think that's pretty hard to describe, there's one Prabhupada disciple. He asked Prabhupada, how do we explain to people that Krishna's grandfather, I think it was Ugrasen, had 1 billion bodyguards? It says that in the Bhāgavatam. He had 1 billion bodyguards. So then he approached Prabhupada and said, how do we convince people? So Prabhupada said, why do you have to mention that? Why is that necessary? Why is that important in your preaching? And that's not the thing we preach. So there's a lot of material, there's a lot of examples given in the Vedas that are beyond our logic, beyond our experience, because the technology, the mysticism is not here now. Like we hear of animals being able to converse in Sanskrit in the Bhāgavatam. When Krishna fought with I think it's Dvida, the gorilla, if I'm correct. maybe I'm getting the name wrong. But anyway, so there's all these things that are hard to believe. It's not within our experience, you know. So sometimes, like from what I've understood, I've never tried to get into those aspects because it's quite difficult. Like, I mean, forget even mentioning that. Some people say, well, why do you worship God in a stone, you know? And people, they call it idol worship. You know, I even heard devotees, maybe it's due to bad English, but they've said that deities represent God. So like deities don't represent God, deities are God. You know, so it's like so we have to preach. We have to be intelligent how we preach. The main thing to preach is we're not the body, right? Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, and chant Hare Krishna. And as that person acquires spiritual credit, these other knowledges, Krishna will make them understandable to us, or will accept it on faith, you know? There's things we cannot understand, we cannot describe by logic and reasoning. And if you're speaking to someone the way you're describing, it's going to be very difficult for them to convince it, because how are you going to prove it? It's not possible. You can say that God is inconceivable, he can do anything he wants. You know, like even the concept of God coming down and having pastimes, getting married, having kids, it's difficult for people to believe. You know, so I think we have to preach according to our realization and preach what we know and be sincere with that. And like I've never really got into stuff like that. But before I've tried to preach to someone, I've tried to preach to them according to their capacity. You know, because one of the offenses to the holy name is preaching to someone outside their qualification, and that's an offense. So we have to be very intelligent. And then as they develop knowledge and faith, and realization, then you'll be able to explain it to them. They may not understand it, but they'll accept it on faith, you know? Like when we read about Krishna lifting Govardhan Hill on his finger for 7 days, 7 nights, obviously it goes beyond logic, right? But we accept it on faith because it's not because we've experienced it, but because Krishna's given us kind of like some sort of access, some sort of qualification, so that becomes believable to us. It's plausible to us, you know? Because we've had some realization and Krishna's blessings. Because understanding anything about Krishna is based on his mercy. And that mercy leads to capacity. And we're meant to engage that capacity in Krishna service. That's my understanding. Maybe anyone would like to share if they've come across that? Had any of these type of challenging questions? No? So does that answer your question, Prabhu? Would you like to ask anything further?
Further, what about there's a person that always takes prasad, but it's still hard for them to comprehend everything. Like it's like on a impersonal.
He still has to put impersonal?
Yeah, but he still comes, take prasad, hears the holy name, but it's still hard for him to comprehend.
Yeah, it's not just chanting, like it's not just eating prasadam, like our philosophy is not just to do one thing only. You know, like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that if we know how to honor prasadam, we can go back to Godhead. You know, he said that. But our philosophy is that we're meant to be balanced, you know? Like there's this famous story of this Indian guy, and he was trying to imitate Haridas Thakur. He was just chanting all the time in Mayapur. Some of you may know the story. And all the devotees were saying, oh, he's this amazing person, he has so much taste for the holy name, he's always chanting. Prabhupada never gave him any attention. Prabhupada didn't think anything much of it, because he wasn't doing any service. He would wake up, have food, then chant all day. Then after a few months, he disappeared. So all the devotees started saying he went back to Godhead, you know? Where did he go? You know, he must have gone back to Godhead. Then 6 months later, they saw him working at a petrol station. And they were like, what happened? He said, I did enough chanting, so I'm good, you know? So that's what I'm saying, you can't just do one thing, you have to balance it. So with prasadam, you have to balance it with chanting. With chanting, you have to balance it with reading Prabhupada's books, with service. You can't just do one thing. Like I've heard devotees who, not to criticize anyone, but they just like doing kirtan. But when I've spoken to them and I found out about their life, they don't chant 16 rounds, they don't even chant on japa beads, they don't even follow some of the regulated principles, and they eat a lot of karmic grains. How much advancement are you going to make following that standard? You're not going to. It's not going to last. And I think at least with prasadam, it's got to lead into something else. You've got to be balanced across. Is that okay? Yeah. Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, you mentioned about being personal with God and not considering him as, we don't worship him as a God, but we worship him because
as a person.
There is another aspect that because we are a follower of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu,
yes.
So we worship the Lord in Dasya Bhav and we don't go in Sakhya, Vatsalya,
Yeah,
Madhurya, and
that's
so
correct.
forth. So how do we kind of understand this? Because we have awe and reverence for the God, because and Krishna mentioned in Bhagavad Gita that Sarvaloka Maheshwaram and so forth. So how do we kind of balance this?
So let me understand your question. You're saying that we worship God as a person, and we don't do Sakya, Vatsalya. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we've been advised to kind of follow Dasya Bhav, Chaitanya
Yeah.
Mahaprabhu's mood,
Yeah.
and not Sakhya, Vatsalya, Madhurya, because it's very more advanced. Being a
Yeah.
sadhak bhakta, we should kind of go in that particular mood. But that mood treats Krishna as the Supreme Lord, as our master. So we see him in that particular sense, or we kind of go more personal. So I wanted to understand that.
Yeah. See, you know, I'll just give a bit more context. So, you know, like when we worship the deity, we worship the deity in the mood of Lakshmi Narayan, right? We're not worshipping them as Radha Krishna in Vrindavan, because we're not qualified. But as we become more spiritually qualified, we come to that platform, right? So when we approach Lord, we don't go up to the Lord, put our arm around him, you know, how you doing stuff. It's very awe and reverence, right? So you know, even though we're worshiping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Gaunitai at home, or Panchatattva, we still have to have that awe and reverence in the beginning, okay? Because we can't, but that's the mood, what the mood we're aspiring for is the personal mood. Our philosophy is we worship God in the personal form. Now, these other things you said, Vatsalya, Sakya, it's not that, you can remember that the jiva has one of those relationships with Krishna in the spiritual world. And it's not that we're just all meant to be gopis. That's not correct. Because all these moods, all these different rasas, they have tinges of madhurya, of love for Krishna, you know? So it's not, we don't reject them. So when you go back to God, you could be a gopa and you go to the spiritual world, and you could be fully conversant with this higher rasa, but this is your main rasa of worship, of having a relationship with Krishna in the mood of a friend. But the thing is, in the beginning when we're worshipping the Lord, we're doing it with awe and reverence, and we're cultivating that. And as we become spiritually advanced, you know, as our devotion sprouts, then we become fully aware of that. And then if you become qualified at the end of this life, because you know you'll be born somewhere in Bhoma Vrindavan, somewhere in the material world, in that rasa, like i.e. a cowherd boy, and then you go from bhava bhakti to prema bhakti, and you cultivate that relationship with the sweetness of madhurya, but while maintaining that rasa. So we don't reject it, we do accept it, but we do it carefully. We approach it step by step, you know, because there are people who are called sahajiyas who confuse a spiritual emotion with a material emotion. They jump straight into the rasa of acting like someone in the spiritual world, and then they completely deviate. That's what we're trying to be protected from. So we have to approach Lord in a very step-by-step, safe way, so we don't get deviated, you know? Because we're not qualified to act like that. Does that help? Would anyone like to add to that? Okay, anyone else? Or anyone else question? Okay, thank you very much. Śrimad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari 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 Bol.